The Empire of Plagatea was an empire located in the continent of Plagos. This state controlled the overwhelming majority of the continent, which made them one of the biggest powers in northern Rathnir at the time, rivaled by only the Second Empire of Plagatéa. The empire collapsed into various provinces following the death of Emperor Nero on August 13, 2021. Later, it would largely reunify temporarily into the Kingdom of Plagos under Queen Isiru Numachi, before she proclaimed the kingdom would now be known as the realm of Arsine. Before the Empire of Plagatea, the nations of Plagos had united in a federal system called the Nova Plagatea Federation. The federation was plagued with issues, the most prevalent being its inability to form a stable and working government. Opposing sides were formed between the two dictators that were in control of the federation until a government was formed. On one side was Nero, the shogun of Shigatata Shogunate, which was the most powerful and influential state in the federation. By extension, this made Nero the most influential and powerful ruler in the Federation. Nero wished to form a more stable government with a republican structure, where all the states in the Federation would have a vote. Opposing him was Crabapple Zerkalo, the president of Aranovala. In Crab's eyes, the Federation had to have a more centralized state. The disagreements drove the Federation to the brink of civil war. However, the appearance of a new opponent, Jaedrex, would change things. Jaedrex's actions forced the nation to go into referendum to become a kingdom. Crabs and Nero united together to prevent Jaedrex from emerging victorious, with Nero running against him. Due to the large and loyal population of the shogunate, he won the referendum easily. As a consequence, the nation turned from a federal republic to a kingdom, thus forming the United Kingdom of Plagatea. Shortly after the referendum, Jaedrex started a heated debate in the former Senate of the Federation about Nero's management. Nero's reforms would strip all the nations from their lands and reduce every single nation in the newly formed kingdom into a mere city-state. Because of that, with the manipulation of Jaedrex, both Nova Regna and Zervoslavia revolted against the crown. The king of Zervoslavia called Ryazan to support its independence against Plagatea, but they backed out when the imperial archonate of Viodoxa offered their unconditional support for the newly formed kingdom, and so Zervoslavia revolt was suppressed. Though the Nova Regnan revolt was another story, at this point Jaedrex had taken leadership of the revolt, and the two sides were taking part in a proxy war. Plagatea was facing the issue that the revolt had allied themselves with Bardonia and a Hudican federation. Because of that, a diplomatic fight between the two sides raged for 2 months until Plagatea and Viodoxa agreed on a scheme to expel the rebels. Plagatea would sell the revolted land to Viodoxa so they can deal with them without foreign interference. The scheme almost worked, but one of the archons of Viodoxa invited a new player to the continent of Plagos. His name was D. Loaded. In doing this, the archons of Viodoxa had backstabbed the young nation and created a new rival in Plagos. The newly established state of Donfur was a threat to not only Plagatea, but all of Plagos. Because of that, a new policy was drafted to stop their expansion, the so-called Pax Plagatea. After some border disputes between the two states, Donfur ultimately collapsed due to diplomatic pressure that Pax Plagatea was causing. As a last attempt to avoid the capture of their lands from Plagatean forces, Donfur was sold to the Empire of Uldarash. That action ended the 3-month period known as the Time of Troubles. Plagatea began a colonial expedition with the creation of the Dominion of Mitchinaru. It was the first colony with Gaokong as its founding settlement. After the integration of Seaside into the empire, the colony of Persevo was also added to the imperial holdings. There were talks of forming the Dominion of Persevo. However, during the collapse of the empire, the colonies were left without guidance, protection, or guarantees. Thus, they were forced to yield to other powers in Eldham. Persevo was brought under Skrold-Brodir control, and Mitchinaru was brought under the Simulami Empire and was renamed Cardovia. After some careful negotiations with Plagatea, Jaedrex's rebellion finally succeeded and the Kingdom of Plagadonia was formed. The Plaguethian leadership had initially hoped for peaceful coexistence and cooperation with the young kingdom. However, Plagadonia sought to challenge Plaguethian dominance in Plagos. The aggression and posturing from Plagadonia was considered too much of a destabilizing influence by Plaguethian leadership, one that cannot be allowed to continue. On the 4th of July 2021, the United Kingdom of Plagatea formally declared a state of war against the Kingdom of Plagadonia. After numerous skirmishes, Plagadonia collapsed due to toxicity and the banishment of their leadership from Rathnir. The Bardonian Empire also saw the war as destabilizing, so they intervened and temporarily annexed Plagadonia in order to restore order. Plaguethian and Bardonian forces fought alongside each other and crushed the resistance of Plagadonia. After negotiations, the Bardonians yielded Plagadonia over to Plagatea, at which point Tagavor Crabapples announced the annexation and the First Empire of Plagatea on the 9th of July 2021. Marshal Jackson would make an agreement on the 9th of July with Plagatea for the integration of the Republic of Seaside into the Empire. The Seaside Leadership Council would overrule and reject his proposition. However, Plagatea exerted diplomatic pressure on Seaside's council. Despite Jackson's banishment from Rathnir, Plagatea would assume control over Seaside, creating the Crownland of Seaside. Most of its citizens, along with Seaside's council, will leave to form their own society south in Bardonia's Avalon province. On August 13th, the Skittles Alliance, backed by Magisterium, declared war on the Empire. Due to the recent death of Tagavor Nero, Tagavor Doom was left in control of an unstable nation. As he saw it, the only way to protect the Empire was to instruct all the lords to declare independence and reunify at a later date to give Plagatea a fresh start. The lords did so, and one by one, lordship provinces declared independence. The death of Tagavor Nero had left no obvious ruler due to previous Tagavor Doom's unwillingness to rule. Thus, due to the absence of a clear successor, a succession crisis began between Lady Asiru Numachi of Sakura and Serf Bort of Gungam. However, merely days later, after lengthy negotiations, the majority of the former empire was once again united under Queen Asiru. Shortly afterward, the queen proclaimed the kingdom would henceforth be known as the realm of Aserikane. She then established a new government, mainly notable for precedents of several new elected ministers, including a prime minister. Now we will begin to look into Plagatea's current state. It is here that we're going to fast forward and begin discussing the Second Empire of Plagatea now that we know the major events that led us to this point. The Second Empire of Plagatea is a diarchical state that covers the majority of the continent of Plagos and North-eastern Rathnir and also parts of Arsine and South-west Eldham. Rathnir's lands are currently ruled by Tagavor Alexander S. Numachi. Eldham's lands are currently ruled by Tagavor Leon Olsen-Tanaka. Multiple lordship provinces ruled by feudal lords, all united under the Tagavors, and is a member of the Sapphire Commonwealth. During the succession crisis and the collapse of the empire, Plagatea Mitchinaru, which then became Cardovia, was sold. Due to this, Cardovians and the magistrate Leon Olsen-Tanaka had been distrustful of the new government. They perceived it as traitorous and weak. On the 5th of September, after witnessing the weak state of their economy system and the military forces, Leon chose to act. He announced the establishment of the Second Plagatean Empire on Eldham, and stated that he was taking his rightful claim as Tagavor. Leon was quickly supported by the Simulami Empire. His claims as Tagavor would be heavily disputed with letters from the last orders from the former Tagavor Nero. The letters showed that only two rightful Tagavors of Nero's death were Asiru Numachi and Doom. Leon would later admit, while in negotiations with the Senate of the realm, that his right was through his military and those that had infiltrated a Aserikane government that were loyal to him. Leon then opened negotiations with the Senate of the realm of Aserikane. He stated that there would be a war unless Aserikane agreed to the terms that he laid out, and that his military would crush the realm of Aserikane in this event. Leon made three statements. Plicatia would become the capital of the Second Plagatean Empire. Aserikane would be renamed to the Second Plagatean Empire, and Aserikane would be forced to pay a weekly tribute of 1 block of gold to the empire in Eldham. He and the Senate would proceed to negotiate these terms to an eventual settlement that stated that there would be a return to Tagavor diarchy, with Leon ruling over the empire in Eldham and Queen Asiru ruling over Rathnir. However, the Senate throughout all of this had been forced to act without their monarch due to her being away on a diplomatic visit, and still required her approval. When she returned, she was horrified by the seeming acceptance of the situation, and the fact that negotiations had immediately begun under the pretense that intervention from Aserikane's allies elsewhere in the globe would result in the end of any hope for unity in Plagos, which would be worse than ceding control to Leon. She was given the opportunity to finalize and rule jointly, but she did not feel she could do so in good faith. She had sworn Plagatea would never again become an empire under her rule, and was disgusted by what she called a coup by Leon in her official abdication announcement. She instead chose to abdicate the throne, announcing a statement she would travel to live with her relatives in Viodoxa with her husband, King Techno Numachi. Upon hearing this, Leon mocked the queen, branding her weak in his own statement. He then announced the existence of the new empire, replacing what he branded as the weak, ineffective previous government of Aserikane. Leon proceeded with establishing the terms of agreement with the Senate, appointing Doom as his Tagavor, and Revo as a royal regent. He also merged the governments in Eldham and Rathnir together, though with officials primarily based in Plagos. He also announced the Senate would be used as a purely advisory council with senior government leadership, though it would have no legislative ability. On September 7, 2021, the Second Plagatean Empire re-entered the Confederation of Plagos under their new name. They were officially recognized as a successor state of the realm of Arsine. After the loss of Duran, Tagavor Leon proposed a reform to previously existing Plagosi Confederation charter. This resulted in the creation of the Constitution of Confederation of Plagos by national representatives and leaders at the convention a few days later. Veldion was later proposed and approved to be the region where the new capital of the Confederation of Plagos would be built, which was to be named Requiem. However, the conflict interests of the Confederation would bring about its collapse less than a month later, with frequent arguments between Plagatea, Alamein, and Lunaris representatives. Joint Ministers for Economics Alexander Numachi and Lord Lieutenant Joseph drafted a new guild system heavily influenced by previous Ravadak reforms a few days after the formation of the empire. After the necessary administrative work had been carried out, primarily by the Tagavors, the guilds were announced and formalized on the 20th of September. The guilds involved were the Mining Guild, Druids Guild, the Builders Guild, and the Plaguethian Army, which began training soon after its formation. On the 22nd of September, Lunaris joined the Empire as a protectorate state, though it was later purchased by Baranov. Seaside rejoined as Lordship, though this proved only to be a temporary arrangement as they would succeed again on the 26th of September. On the 28th of September, Plagatea united with the Emirate of Niger and the Second Empire of Simulami to form the Sapphire Commonwealth, represented as one nation on the maps by cartographers and acting as one military, while coordinating foreign policy. Domestic issues are largely left to individual countries. You can find out more about the Sapphire Commonwealth in a recent video. Links are in the description. Plagatea continued its claim to the remaining lands of Zervoslavia after the king attempted to hand the land over, feeling Plagatea would protect it better than a militarily weak nation, the United Commonwealth. This was prevented from doing so by the laws of their United Commonwealth. Plagatea would continue its claim, citing instability on the border, the need for a link to the rest of the Sapphire Commonwealth, and its inability to protect itself as seen by its unsuccessful defense against the OPTC. The regent Tagavors retracted this claim on the 3rd of October after the Plaguethian provincial revolt. On the morning of the 3rd of October, after several weeks of extreme discontent with the government and its leadership, several Plaguethian provinces in Rathnir, Sakura and Sevilla, and a vassal state, the kingship Veldion declared their support for a new ruler who had announced their claim. Princess Futo Naho of the North, the last true heir by blood to the throne. The spark for this came from the attempt by Revo days earlier to remove Lady Asiru Numachi and Lord Pepek Changtsiu from their positions as lords of the provinces of Sakura and Sevilla. This was seen as a flagrant attempt to consolidate power and remove any form of dissent, as well as several comments and actions made by Leon and Revo that were seen as aggressive against the people of Veldion. Lord Pepek joined the planning for the revolt that Lady Asiru Numachi and King Glorak had already begun a week prior. Little is known about the planning, only that it was assured that Niger and Simulami's neutrality in any conflict and a large majority of the nations of Plagos had privately pledged support. Upon hearing the revolt and the announcements, Tagavor Leon declared a state of martial law aiming to mobilize and crush the revolt. Meanwhile, in a bid to prevent conflict, high-ranking officials from both sides, including Lord Pepek, King Glorak, Lady Asiru Numachi, Alexander Numachi, and a senior diplomat named Sterling, met for negotiations. This eventually resulted in the signing of the treaties with the provinces and the vassal laying down their arms. The most significant effects included the reintegration of Veldion as a province, a $50,000 fine for the province of Sakura, the removal of Tagavor Revo, the establishment of a temporary regency for the Rathnir Tagavor, with complete separation of government between Rathnir and Eldham, and Leon to govern solely in Eldham. On the 19th of October, the Tagavor election began, with the lords casting their votes to Tagavor Leon. 5 of the 6 electors were needed for a candidate to ascend to the throne. All cast their votes and unanimously voted for Alexander Numachi, who assumed the role of Tagavor. He was soon after confirmed as a ruling monarch in the Sapphire Commonwealth and was announced to Rathnir. He would give a speech the next day, receiving congratulation messages from many leaders of the Rathnir nations. The Kenryo, who were the senators, were revised, with some of the Kenryo appointed to balance the Senate between provinces. The balance follows the format of 2 Kenryo and 1 lord from each individual province. With this new join, which is the Senate, in tandem with the survey conducted to assess the population and where they stand politically, reforms began, such as the Zabtranian pantheon no longer being the state religion in Rathnir. A survey indicated 80% of the population wished for a secular state, and the join voted for this to be enacted into a law. Lord Pipek of Sevilla was appointed as royal regent to Tagavor Alexander Numachi, and Daimyo Tekno Numachi of Sakura was appointed as a daijin of the join, presiding over the join's day-to-day functioning. Other reforms occurred, such as the recognition of citizens from Eldham and other vassals and protectorates of Plagatea, all becoming equally recognized as citizens along those who lived in Rathnir Plagatea. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I do appreciate you all very, very much. The support has been amazing. This one was a little harder to make, pulling from multiple sources of wikis that were all made at different points in time. I know I'm still mispronouncing things. I'm sorry, but I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you all again so much for all that you do for me, and for all that care and support that you're sending my way. So thank you all very much. Hope that you look forward to the next one. Until then, check down below in the description for any kind of tools that I might have used, or sources in general, in order to make this video. So thank you all again. Goodbye.